Hi everybody, hope you and your families are safe and that you're avoiding going out in public and avoiding all public gatherings and that you're all healthy. Miss all of you, and I just want you to know that this is the first of my lessons. The day is Tuesday, March 17th, 2020. I'm sitting in my kitchen, so if you hear sounds of Mrs. Bowman making bagels, Dr. Bowman, sorry. Sorry about that. Wish I could share the bagels with you. Miss all of you also. All right, so what we're gonna do today is pick up basically where we left off on last week. I don't know when that was, Friday? Obviously, we're working on the informative speech and the planning stage. So just as a recap, if you were absent or just to remind you about what we did last, we were in class and you proposed to me your potential topics. Many of you got your topics approved, so in that case, it's time to move on to the planning stage. Some of you were a little unsure about your topics. Some of your topics needed to be revised, and some of you just needed to come up with new topics. If you were one of those individuals who was either unsure or you didn't have any good ideas, then you need to contact me as soon as possible, like today, with ideas. Give me a topic, maybe a backup topic, maybe also explain a little bit about what your main points might be. Of course, you want to keep those options as broad as possible, because we're going to be talking to each other about how to make sure that your speech is as focused as possible. Another thing to keep in mind is that the last time we had class, I passed out this sheet. If your topic is approved, this sheet needs to be completed, both sides of it. If you were either absent or you lost this sheet, you can go to my Google Classroom to pick it up. To print it up. But it definitely needs to be completed. Keep in mind that this needs to be done before the actual outlining, and upcoming lessons will talk about the specifics of outlining. I'm going to change the camera angle to a tabletop, desktop angle so that we can talk about more specifics. Okay, before we get into all of this, I just want to say that later on in the video, I'm going to talk about how things will potentially go with regards to your actual presentations. We're all trying this out. We're all learning together. We have to be flexible. So we will discuss later about how you're actually going to present. It is a public speaking class after all. So the informative speech, the planning stage, so far, did you get your topic approved? If not, please contact me through Remind with your idea or ideas. Did you complete this planning and preparing worksheet? Again, you can get it on my Google Classroom. Print it up, complete it. And did you conduct initial research? I would say you should have probably spent at least 15 minutes seeing what's out there. Yes, hopefully you chose a topic that you are familiar with, knowledgeable about, but you also want to see what's out there to make sure that it either coincides with your knowledge and so that you have some sources that you could use during your speech. And we'll talk more about using sources later today. So what are we going to talk about today? Today we're going to talk about main ideas. We're also going to talk about organizational patterns or organizational structures for your speech. We're also going to talk about connective devices. This is something that starting last year, I really started pushing, and it made a major difference in just the ability of the audience to retain information and to follow along, to not get lost during a student's speech. And lastly, we're going to talk about outside research. So for the majority of today's lesson, you're going to need this sheet. You can find it on my Google Classroom. It would really help if you print it up and read it even before you continue with the video. You know, I would say that it's self-explanatory, but I think that I want to go into further detail to help clarify things that might not be that easy to understand. So if you have not yet done so, please go to my Google Classroom, find this sheet, print it up. If you can't print it up, then at the very least read it. And then you can resume this video, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty details of it. So you've got your main ideas. Topic's been approved, you've got your main ideas. Or you think you have your main ideas. So let's talk about that. First of all, how many main ideas? Well, it's an 8-minute speech, approximately, give or take a minute, minute and a half. So you have to think in terms of, you know, how much can I talk about? First of all, did I choose a topic that is, you know, it's manageable enough that I could do in 8 minutes, right? We're not going to be able to take a topic like, you know, what is quantum theory, and in any realistic way convey that to the audience, because there are undergrad and graduate and doctorate courses dedicated to understanding what quantum theory is. So, you know, consider things in a bite-sized way, all right? Instead of, for example, let's say we want to inform the audience about the history of rap. Well, I don't know if you're going to be able to do that in 8 minutes. So we kind of have to narrow our scope. Perhaps we want to give us the history of East Coast rap, right? So now we've got a little bit more specific topic here. Or maybe we want to be even more specific. Maybe we want to give a history of women East Coast rappers. So that's a little bit more manageable. And then once you've got your topic, you have to consider, okay, how am I breaking this down into my main points? On average, students will have around 3 main points for an informative speech. And I'm going to say the same for the persuasive speech when we get to it too. 3 works, right? So you're going to have a first main point, a second main point, and a third main point. And each of those points will be broken down into subpoints, and we'll get into the subpoints and what sort of information makes up your subpoints. But 3 main points is the average. Yeah, I guess you can have 2 main points, and yes, you might have 4 main points, but keep in mind that if you're going to have 4 main points, that you're not going to be able to go in as great of depth to those points. So, you know, the average is 3. Try to come up with 3. Now, what are my 3 main points, right? How do I decide that? The way I like to approach it is I want you to imagine that you're talking to somebody, and, you know, your topic comes up, and they say to you, you know, you seem really informed about this, but, I gotta go in about 5 minutes. Can you just tell me, like, what you think are the 3 most important things to know about this topic? All right? 5 minutes? These 3 things? This is what they are. If I had a little bit more time, I could go into greater detail of each one of those, but these are going to be my 3 main points. You have to determine those. Now, there's more than one way to determine them, which is what we're going to talk about when it gets into organizational patterns. I want to make sure that when it comes to this sheet that you are completely clear of what I mean by organizational patterns. And we kind of touched on this in some of the class on Friday, I believe. So organizational patterns basically mean that how are we moving through the content of our speech? Are we going to move through it from a historical or chronological perspective? Are we going to move through it, depending on the topic, right? From a spatial perspective. In other words, like, how does the thing exist in space? We'll talk more about that in a little bit. We also might approach it from more of a cause and effect type of angle. That's another one. They call that causal order. Let's see if I can find this. It's not going to focus, but it's this one right here. Causal order, not casual. Causal. And then there's the topical order, which is kind of, if you ask me, the most freestyle type of organizational structure. One way or the other, you should be choosing one of those and sticking to it for your speech. It is actually possible to come up with a little bit of a hybrid, right? So you could, for example, have a generally topical approach where you kind of move through, I'll give you examples in a moment, where you move through the content in topics. But one of those main topics is a historical approach where you run through the chronology. Let me illustrate this with an example. First, I need some water. That's good. Have you ever tried this? So good. Could drink it like all day. Oh, it's like one of the best drinks ever. As a side note, just so you know, I might eventually do some lessons live. I might use Facebook. Not Facebook. Never Facebook. I might use YouTube Live. That way we could interact, or we might use some sort of a video conferencing platform, if possible, so that we can have interaction. As of now, you could leave comments as far as your questions go, and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. And eventually I'm going to need a way to know that you've watched this video. So I don't know if that means hitting thumbs up. I don't know if I get notified if a specific person hits. Who knows? I'm new to YouTubing. All right, so let's get an example here. Let's say I wanted to give a speech on Uniondale High School, okay? How can I go about that? You know, if somebody said to me, oh, Uniondale High School, that's interesting. I gotta go in 5 minutes. Give me 3 things that you want me to know. All right, what will be my 3 things? Well, I could move through the Uniondale High School from like a historical or chronological perspective where I say, all right, this is what happened. Uniondale High School was founded in 1950, right? In Long Island, New York, Nassau County. And I could talk about, I could split it up into generations, for example. So from 1950 to 70 or 80, right? That would be my first main point. The details would be what happened during those years. Then the second main point would be, all right, 1980 to 2000, okay? And then I'm going to talk about how things changed. Maybe there were things that were built. Maybe the demographics changed. Maybe programs were added. Then for my third main point, obviously, it's following a chronological perspective, right? I'm going to be going from the year 2000 to 2020. That's when Mr. Bowman was at Uniondale High School. So that's chronological, right? Think of it from just time order. What about spatial order? How would I deal with Uniondale High School if I was talking about it from its existence in space? Not so much time, but space. Well, I would talk about, for example, it as a place. I might zoom out. I might say that Uniondale High School is in New York State, and it's in Long Island, and it's in Nassau County, and it's in Uniondale, which is in the town of Hempstead. So, but let's talk about the space itself, right? I might want to talk about it from the different parts of the building. I could do first floor, second floor, third floor. Right? This is what you would see if you walked all around the first floor. You'd walk in from the main entrance and you would see, the marble floor, and to the left is this amazing new music wing, and then there's this new auditorium, and you keep going, you get to the lunchrooms, amazing. And then you keep going, you make a right, and you're going to see some, classrooms. Oh, by the way, if you make a couple of lefts, you're going to see the quote-unquote new wing, which has been there since the year 2000, when I first started. We still call it new wing. All right, and you keep going, right? So you get the picture there. Your guidance, all of that, the administrative wing, all of that, right? And then you could do the same for the second floor. And then you could do the same, you get to the catwalk, right? And then the third floor, okay? Don't forget the pool. So in this case, we're literally moving through the thing, the topic, in its existence in space. So you would organize according to that. A third organizational pattern would be a causal order. So you want to think in terms of cause and effect, right? And how would we do that if we were dealing with Uniondale High School? Well, one might be, all right, let's take the music wing, right? What was the cause of renovating the music wing? And what were the effects of that, right? You could do the same thing for demographic changes in Uniondale High School, right? Cause versus effect. So, white flight, what caused that? If you don't know what that is, we could research it. It's an interesting topic for persuasive speeches. So white flight in the community of Uniondale, and what were the effects of that? Or, demographic changes where we went, what was the cause of having a population that was, 90% this demographic, and where we are currently, where we have 50%, right? There's major demographic changes in the community. So, I'd probably stay away from those for an informative speech. Well, maybe not, but, but what you're dealing with here with that is cause effect. Truthfully, a lot of students don't use the cause and effect method organizational structure for their informative speeches, but it's there as an option, so you want to keep that in mind. And it would actually be worth just considering your speech topic from that perspective. It's also interesting, it'll help you when it comes to anticipating the questions that you'll get from the audience. And yes, there will be a Q&A session. The last organizational pattern would just be simply a topical pattern, where in this case you will select your main points just according to topics, right? So, for example, as far as Uniondale High School goes, I need to think about what, somebody says. Again, tell me something in about 5 minutes. Give me 3 things about Uniondale High School. Well, maybe I want to talk about, the athletic program. And we get into the soccer team, and we get into the basketball team, right? Those would be the details of the first point. Maybe for the second point, I want to talk about the music program, right? We get into the show choir, and we get into the, the jazz band and all of that. Choir. And lastly, my last topic, right? It's why it's called topical. The last one would be, the AP program, or maybe, the SUPA program, or earning college credits while in high school. Or lunch. It's your choice, right? So these would be the topics. The school lunch program. I'd avoid that one. Again, just to recap, the 4 basic organizational patterns of an informative speech would be chronological, so we're moving through it from a historical perspective. We have spatial, we're moving through the topic as it exists in space. Causal, which is a cause and effect. This happened, then this happened, right? In the early 90s, for example, the late 90s, early 2000s, there was an increase in crime, right? Gang activity. We started implementing metal detectors, and these were the effects, okay? And topical. Chronological, spatial, causal, topical. Choose one. Try out more than one though, and then decide. Now, for further examples, if you haven't done so, or even if you have, again, consult this worksheet. It breaks it down with an example of Farm Aid. This was a concert that my parents used to watch. You know, it was rock stars coming together to create a concert to help support farmers, right? And so it gives you examples of chronological, spatial, causal, and topical. Okay, we're going to move on to our next topic, connective devices. And this is important. It's important, but it doesn't seem like it is. It's one of these little subtle things that makes a major difference when it comes to your speech. So now's a good time, I guess, to get a snack. Okay, so just as a recap, so far we talked about main ideas, and we also talked about organizational patterns. And now we're going to be moving on to connective devices. Connective devices, most people think of them in terms of transitions, and that's a good way to think about them, but you know, there are different types of transitions and connective devices, and each plays its own little purpose. So as we all know, a transition is when you move from one point of your speech to another, right? You know, that could be something as subtle as saying the word furthermore, right? Or now that I've told you this, I want to tell you this, right? So if I'm moving from, we've already kind of talked about this. As far as your intro goes, the two parts that must be set in stone is the grabber and the preview of points, right? Credibility, relevancy, and your thesis statement. I don't care what order those are in, right? They could be in any order. But the preview of points is going to come last because that's where you're going to say, okay, today I'm going to talk to you about the history of women's shoes. I'm going to talk to you about alternative survival uses of women's shoes. And I'm going to talk to you about how to make a woman's shoe with just 2 sheets of paper and a cotton swab, Q-tip, right? So now the audience knows where we're going. That's a transition, but it's also previewing where we're going. So transitions are key. I need to know that you're moving from one place to the next, whether you're moving from point 2 to point 3, or whether you're moving from your last point to your conclusion, right? Those transitions are key. And you want to think about it from the perspective of an audience member. If we don't know where you are in your speech, then we're lost, right? I think I showed a couple of some examples in class of a student who was, was on YouTube, who didn't go through all of the parts of an introduction. And I was asking you to tell me when to pause, when she's done with her intro. We didn't know. The worst thing that could happen is for an informative speech, the people who are listening are like, I'm lost, right? And one way to ensure that doesn't happen is just to embrace the power of transitions. Now, internal previews. That's basically, right, so the main connective devices are transitions, internal previews, internal summaries, and signposts. We're going to be talking about those 4. And I'm going to do a quick run through because you have the sheet and you could use it yourself, right? It kind of explains it there. But an internal preview is where you preview. We are looking forward, right? This is where we're going to go. So now that I've told you about the history of women's shoes, I would like to explain to you some alternative survival uses for women's shoes, okay? This is a nonsense example, obviously, right? But it's an example nonetheless, okay? That is an internal preview. An internal summary is when you have finished a particular point. You're going to summarize what you've just told the audience, right? Looking backwards. So now that I've told you about the alternative survival uses of women's shoes, I'm going to explain to you how to make a woman's shoe using only 2 sheets of paper, a cotton swab, and a bagel. High heel hiking women's shoe. So that would be internal That would be an internal preview, right? But there's also an internal summary. I think I got lost there. An internal summary is now that I've told you about, right? Now that I've told you about. Looking backwards before you look forward. And then lastly, there's this thing called signposts. And that's just very simple. That's just where you kind of indicate where you are. This could happen whether you're in your main points. My first main point, that right there, first. This, where you hold up your finger, that's a sign point. That's where the audience goes, oh, this is where he is. My second main point, wow, okay, he's about halfway through the speech. All right. My third main point. Now this stuff seems basic, but you would be completely shocked at the amount of speeches that I've seen that just simply neglect to do this sort of thing. And it results in students who are kind of lost. I have seen over and over again where, all of a sudden a speech ends and we're like, wait, what about your other main points? And the speaker thinks, I did them all, but we have no indication because you're just not giving us these little subtle keys to help us know where you are. So signposts are when you say, there are 3 steps to this, right? Step A, step B, step C. Each one of them. When I have notifications popping up and phone calls popping up, it's totally messing with the video, and I think I'm going to have to find a way to string these videos together. And I'm going to do it all on my phone. Hopefully, I've never even used iMovie. I'll try it. I'll figure it out. Okay, so signposts are just like, here's a sign, here's where I am. And by the way, you can incorporate signposts into your actual slideshows. We are going to talk more about slideshows in an upcoming lesson. So just to review, right? We went over the significance of transitions, connective devices in general, right? Those connective devices consist of transitions, internal previews, internal summaries, and signposts. And in a moment, we're just going to be moving on to the final portion, which is references to outside research or just research in general. I hope you see what I did there, right? What I'm asking you to do, I'm doing myself. So, makes sense. Have an idea of where we are. Especially if when I connect these clips of video together, they're in order. That'll be helpful. Okay. Now, outside research is key. I don't care whether you are giving a speech on how to make your particular red velvet cream-filled cupcakes with Nutella frosting speech, and that's your specific recipe, or you're showing us how to do Rachel Ray's red velvet purple frosted cupcakes. Even if you're doing something that is coming from yourself, I'm still requiring you to do some research and to cite sources during your speech. Now, you might be wondering, like, well, why? If I'm showing the class how to make my cupcakes, why do I need to do some outside research? Well, there's a number of reasons why. First of all, you never know. In doing research, you might be realizing that there's a better way to do it. A more convenient way, a faster way, who knows, right? There could be a shortcut. So you might want to bring that to the table. If you research, you might find that the way that you have been doing it is the way everybody else recommends. And if you're informing us about your way, it's really, it lends credibility if you could say, look, this is the way I do it, and this is also the way Rachel Ray does it. So, this is what I highly recommend, right? It just lends credibility. So you have to conduct research. And keep in mind, I said this earlier in class, that research does not simply have to mean you're going on to the internet and finding websites that correspond to what you say or that teach you about something new, right? You can have, if you are, for example, talking about what a pediatric nurse does, right? And your father is a pediatric nurse or physician, let's just say that, right? You could you could use him as a source. Absolutely. You know, you want to ask him, what is your day like? That totally works. I would still do the internet research though, right? You want to kind of balance the anecdotal with what's out there as far as statistical, right? Or what other sources and experts say. The other thing is, and this is a big one, is that I'm also requiring you to cite sources in the midst of your speech. Your source citations must be embedded into the very speech itself. I can't stand it, and I see it all the time, and I'm gonna bet money that some of you will do it, where you give your whole speech, you don't cite one source, or maybe you cite one source, and then at the end of your speech, there's one more slide, and you're like, oh, I forgot, there's this slide here, and those are my sources, and you just see a bunch of URLs. Please don't do that. That's not the way we cite sources. When we cite sources, we are giving the source citation in the midst of the information that we're disseminating. So, for example, you know, according to Rachel Ray, she recommends using 3 cups of flour and 2 cups of sugar, whatever, right? According to the website www.howtomakeredvelvet cream-filled cupcakes that are the best in the world.com, .org.edu, don't use Nutella. It's sugar as a frosting, okay? Whatever it is. You want to put that in there so that we know while you're giving your speech that, oh, okay, this is not just you, these are other people who say it too. And these are just best practices in general when you're trying to inform people. I know that I, for one, can probably do this a little bit more often when I'm teaching. Like, where did I get my info from? Is this just stuff that I've learned on my own, or am I getting this from other places? Who's got questions? I can't answer them. We're not done yet. But we are almost done. Anyway, I had to do a change of location because my wife has to have a video conference and I got kicked out of the kitchen. So, okay. It's not as easy because they don't have a desk, but we'll figure it out. Anyway. Out of everything that I've talked to you today, one of the main things I want to say is make sure that you've chosen a topic that is manageable in its scope, right? You don't want to do a just surface level overview of your topic. You want to feel like that you're going in depth so that the class actually feels informed, like they've learned something new. Whether that's a skill or whether that's, you know, about your favorite artist, whatever. But your topic's important as far as, you know, is my scope narrow enough? The other thing that I can't stress enough is are my main points exactly the way I want them to be? These are the 3 most important things that I need to inform my audience about. This is what we're getting into. The other thing, very subtle but very important, are these transitions and connective devices, these internal previews, these internal summaries and signposts. I can't stress enough how much of a difference they make, right? And you'll notice that if you're watching teachers, you know, let's just take a teacher for example. There have been times when I'm in class and I'm just lost because I don't even know where we are. Like, what page are we on? Or what problem are we on? And that's easy to fix. That's just like the teacher says, okay, now we are moving to page 35. We just jumped from page 25 to 35. Or now we are moving on to the next problem, right? If it's a math class. It's those little things that really make a difference and make it, for those of us who might be daydreamers or whatever, right? They were, oh, we got grounded again. Now we know where we are. And research. Everybody has to do it, and the source citations must be embedded into the actual speech. Not some slide at the end or where you say, these are my sources. Boom. Right? Can't stand that. Okay, let's talk about what's coming up and start to bring this video to a close. where are we moving next? Okay, you need to start thinking about outlining, but I need to teach you how to outline. I also need to talk to you just in general about evidence, or what we might want to call examples, illustrations, demos, specifics, the details that I'm going to be looking for when it comes to the body of your speech. You know, you need to fill your speech with stuff. It's not just an overview, right? It's like, here it is, this is what I'm talking about. So we will talk more about that when it comes to the body, and ways to actually get people to learn things, right? We'll talk about that. Then we're going to talk about outlining. That'll be a separate lesson probably altogether, where I go over my requirements for an outline. Outlining is an important exercise, but as far as I'm concerned, it's really just an exercise in following directions. You know, the reason students will lose points on an outline, it's just a simple thing like, oh, you didn't indent and I said to indent, follow directions. Or you don't have the transition built into your speech between your two main points, right? Where's the transition? You didn't do that. Or you didn't embed your source citation into, or you didn't embed your slideshow in parentheses into your outline. I want to see those things, and you know, we'll talk more about that. I'll give you examples of outlines, and you know, it'll be clear. And then you're going to have to outline, right? Now, at the same time, and this will be its own lesson, you also have to be thinking visually, right? I'm going to be creating some sort of a slideshow, a PowerPoint, a Prezi, a Google slideshow, whatever. I don't care which medium you choose, which slideshow maker you decide to use. I just care that there is some sort of a visual element to your speech, right? Don't forget YouTube. You could use it. You get about 1.5 minutes total worth of video time if you decide to use it. You could do that in straight through, 1.5 minutes. You might want to do 45 seconds and 45 seconds, if that my math is correct. Or you might want to do, okay, now that I've showed you how to do this, watch this expert do it too. And here's a 10-second clip. And then now that I've showed you how to do this, watch this expert do it too. And here's a 15-second clip. So, you know, but we'll talk more about that. But I want to get into slideshows and the do's and don'ts of slideshows, right? I also want to talk about how much info should be on any particular slide. I also want to talk about just what, like, things to avoid at all costs when it comes to slideshows, right? So we'll talk about slideshows. And finally, we're going to have to figure out, you know, you're going to have to practice, and we're going to have to figure out how we're going to do these presentations. I don't know. We'll figure it out, you know. If that means that we all have to find a bubble big enough that we could all, each individual fits in a bubble, like a big balloon, and we all meet in the middle of a field, I don't think that works. Or if we're going to video conference, or if I'm going to have you record yourself, no vertical videos. And you need to have an audience, so you show me your living room, and there's your little brother, and there's your aunt, and there's your grandmother, and there's your mother, and there's your other mother, and there's your third mother, whatever. So, you know, we'll have to think about that. We might just video conference them. I might say, okay, at this time, and your attendance will be required. But again, we have to remain flexible. This is a crazy time, as you all know. And so it's important that we remain flexible. We take care of ourselves and our loved ones. And that we establish kind of a routine. You know, we work on helping ourselves and helping others. And part of doing that is just continuing doing what we would be doing normally, even though we can't. This is why I'm making this video. I'm not going to stop teaching. You're not going to stop learning. We're going to get you college credit one way or the other. Oh, and if any of you have questions about the scholarships, who knows? You just have to, we'll look out, you know. I'll contact Barton sometime this week and ask her what the deal is with that. and then, you know, I'll let you know. They'll probably send something out anyway. So I said it at the beginning and I want to say it again. Right now, one of the best things that you could do is just stay home, avoid public places, avoid any gathering. You know, the only people that you should be around are the people in your house. You don't want to be around anybody. They say, you know, limit the, you know, you hear the president 50 or more, or some towns are like 10 or more. It only takes one person, right? So anytime you interact with someone, you want to approach it as if you have the virus, they have the virus, right? So, you know, stay put, okay? If you have questions, you could contact me through Remind. You want to leave a comment down below? You know, I just created this channel, by the way, and I'm not a YouTube expert, so I hope this is okay. And okay, hope this was somewhat informative.